In Green Grove, shadows clung to the corners of every room, and whispers filled the air as night fell, a perfect cloak for the secrets buried deep within this sleepy town. Sophie Maxwell, a bright and curious 17-year-old, had always felt an undercurrent of darkness threading through the town's picturesque facade. Her life had been marked by the unsolved murder of her older brother, Michael, 4 years earlier, a wound that time refused to heal. The day another chilling murder shook Green Grove, Sophie's obsession with cryptic puzzles found its calling. The local newspaper received a coded letter, a taunting message from the murderer who called himself the Cipher. The police were baffled, unable to crack the code, which seemed to mock their efforts. Sophie, who spent her evenings poring over old puzzle books Michael had left behind, saw patterns in the cipher's cryptograms that the police did not. Her knack for solving puzzles was uncanny, almost as if the cryptic messages spoke directly to her. With each letter the cipher sent, Sophie grew more determined to unmask him and perhaps find the link to her brother's death. She worked in secret, knowing that her single mother, still fragile from Michael's loss, wouldn't approve of her dangerous curiosity. Her room became a command center, walls plastered with maps of Green Grove, newspaper clippings, and photographs of the victims, all connected with red yarn like a web of blood. The break in the case came when Sophie decoded a message that hinted at a location, the old mill on the outskirts of town, long abandoned and shrouded in local lore. It was said to be haunted by the spirits of workers who died in a mysterious fire decades ago. Armed with her flashlight and the last letter Michael had ever written to her, a letter she hadn't opened until that night, Sophie ventured into the night. The old mill groaned under the weight of its age as Sophie's flashlight beam cut through the darkness. She found the room described in the cryptogram, its door slightly ajar, creaking on its hinges. Inside, she discovered a horrifying display, personal belongings of the victims arranged in a grotesque tableau, a grim gallery of the cipher's conquests. As her flashlight flickered, the room seemed to close in around her. Then the beam settled on something that made her heart stop. A familiar watch, unmistakably Michael's. As this realization set in, footsteps echoed in the hollows of the mill. Sophie hid behind an old machine, her breath shallow, as a figure entered the room. He began speaking softly, his voice a distorted whisper. "I knew you'd come, Sophie. You're so much like him, so curious, so smart." The voice was unnerving, eerily familiar. It was Mr. Hawkins, the town librarian, someone who had watched Sophie and Michael grow up, someone who had always shown an interest in their fascination with puzzles. Mr. Hawkins stepped into the light, his face twisted into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Michael got too close, you know. He had figured it out, started asking questions about the old cases, the ones from before you were born. His calm was terrifying, his confession even more so. Sophie's mind raced, her fear mingling with a burning need for justice. As Mr. Hawkins advanced, she remembered the letter in her pocket. With trembling hands, she opened it and read Michael's last words, a warning about Mr. Hawkins, about his suspicions. Using her wits and the environment to her advantage, Sophie managed to evade Mr. Hawkins long enough to send a distress message from her phone. The final confrontation was a blur of flashing lights and police sirens as the authorities finally arrived, drawn by the clues Sophie had pieced together and shared in her message. Mr. Hawkins was arrested, his reign of terror concluded by the very mind he had underestimated. As the town of Green Grove breathed a sigh of relief, Sophie visited her brother's grave, the decoded letter in hand. "We did it, Michael," she whispered. The mystery was solved, but the shadows in Green Grove seemed only slightly less dark. Sophie's bravery turned her into an unwitting hero, a guardian of her brother's memory, and a beacon of hope that even in the darkest of times, light could find a way through the cracks. Harrogate Lane had always been a place of shadows, where the cobblestones remembered more blood than rain. The history of this part of the city was marked by the chilling episodes of the Faceless Man, a notorious murderer from over a century ago who had never been caught. His crimes had faded into legend until a string of new murders began, mirroring the old ones with eerie precision. Emma Clark, a young and tenacious crime journalist, was drawn to the dark allure of Harrogate Lane. Her connection to the area was deep. Not only did she live nearby, but her family had been part of the community for generations. When the new murders started, Emma saw an opportunity to make a name for herself by solving a mystery that had baffled others for decades. Armed with her pen, notebook, and an insatiable curiosity, Emma dove into the archives of the city's history, unearthing old police reports, photographs, and newspaper clippings about the Faceless Man. During her research, she stumbled upon a hidden diary in her great-great-grandmother's belongings, tucked away in an old dust-covered trunk in the attic. The diary was a revelation, filled with first-hand accounts of the original murders. Emma's great-great-grandmother had been a contemporary of the Faceless Man, and her detailed entries suggested she knew more about the murderer than she had let on to the authorities. As Emma pored over the diary, a chilling possibility emerged. Could her own ancestor have been involved, or even been the Faceless Man? As she dug deeper, the murders continued, each new crime scene meticulously staged to resemble the historical killings. Emma began to publish her findings in a series of articles that captivated the city. But with the spotlight came danger. She received cryptic threats, warning her to stop her investigation, each signed with a symbol that appeared in her ancestor's diary. Undeterred, Emma followed a lead to a decrepit tenement house on Harrogate Lane. There, she discovered a secret room that seemed frozen in time, with old medical instruments, Victorian-era photographs, and a ledger containing details about the original victims. It was as if the Faceless Man had never left. The climax of her investigation came when she arranged to meet a mysterious informant claiming to have crucial information about the murders. At the rendezvous in Harrogate Lane, under the dim light of a flickering street lamp, Emma came face to face with the modern-day killer, who had been following her work closely, obsessed with her and the connection to the past. The confrontation was tense, with Emma using her wits and the historical knowledge she had acquired to outmaneuver the killer. Just as he was about to strike, police sirens wailed in the distance, and Detective Larson, whom Emma had secretly informed of her meeting, arrived with backup. The killer was arrested, revealed to be a historian who had become consumed by the Faceless Man's legacy. Emma's bravery and relentless pursuit of the truth not only brought a murderer to justice, but also cleared her family's name from the shadows of suspicion. Her articles on the case won her accolades and a devoted readership, and Harrogate Lane, though forever haunted by its past, began to see a future where the ghosts were just stories. In the aftermath, Emma visited her great-great-grandmother's grave, placing a copy of her articles by the headstone. "We did it," she whispered, feeling a sense of closure as the sun set over Harrogate Lane, casting long shadows that seemed a little less dark. Hollow Creek was shrouded in mist and mystery, a place whispered about in the dimly lit halls of Eldridge College. The dense forest that bordered the small college town had been the site of numerous disappearances over the years, earning it a sinister reputation and stories that chilled the bones of first-year students. Leah Reynolds, a vibrant and ambitious journalism major, had always been drawn to the enigmatic allure of Hollow Creek. Her fascination became personal when, after a party on a foggy October night, she vanished without a trace. The only sign of her was a single muddy shoe found by the creek's edge. Ava Carter, Leah's roommate and best friend, was devastated. Leah's disappearance echoed the loss of Ava's older sister, who had similarly vanished near Hollow Creek years before. Refusing to accept another unsolved mystery in her life, Ava threw herself into finding Leah, driven by grief and an unshakable feeling that Leah was reaching out to her in her dreams, begging to be found. Ava's search led her to team up with Detective Nolan Hayes, a young officer whose brother had disappeared in the same woods. Nolan, skeptical but empathetic, agreed to reopen the investigation, driven by his own haunted past and Ava's unwavering determination. Together they delved into the history of Hollow Creek, uncovering decades of disappearances that the locals attributed to a curse. According to town lore, the spirits trapped in the creek could only move on if they claimed another soul to take their place. Their investigation brought them to an old isolated cabin inhabited by an elderly woman known as Madame Morrigan. Morrigan was a recluse, regarded by the town as a witch. She spoke in riddles of spirits angered by a broken pact, and warned them that solving the mystery might cost them more than they were willing to pay. Ignoring her ominous warnings, Ava and Nolan explored the dense woods, where Ava experienced terrifying visions. She saw apparitions of the missing, their voices whispering through the trees, guiding her deeper into the forest. The boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred as the forest seemed to come alive, ensnaring them in chilling sights and sounds. In the heart of the forest, they discovered a hidden grove where the creek curved into a perfect circle. Here, the remains of those lost to Hollow Creek lay submerged in the dark waters, preserved and untouched. Among them was a recent addition, a silver locket belonging to Leah. As they confronted this grim reality, the forest stirred, and a spectral figure emerged from the creek. It was Leah, or something wearing her guise, her voice echoing the creek's sorrowful history. She explained the pact made long ago between the town's founders and the creek's ancient spirits, a pact broken, leading to a cycle of vengeance. Ava, heartbroken but resolute, realized that to break the cycle, she needed to offer the spirits something they wanted more than souls. With Nolan's help, she retrieved artifacts from the town's founding families, returning them to the creek as a gesture of reconciliation. As dawn broke, the apparitions faded and the creek's waters calmed. Ava and Nolan left the grove, the weight of the curse lifted, but the loss of Leah and the others a lingering sorrow. Returning to town, Ava dedicated herself to telling their stories, ensuring that the memory of Leah and the mystery of Hollow Creek would not be forgotten. Through her writing, she gave voice to the vanished, and in her words, the town found the courage to face its shadowed past, hopeful that the vanishing at Hollow Creek had finally come to an end.